Hello and welcome to our newest episode of A Conversation With, our Zing Learning podcast. This time we are talking to the incredibly talented Rachel Long-Smith, who is the co-founder and CEO of Effekt and is a wonderful, amazing designer, not only through the actual work that she's doing, but also the impact that she's having socially with lots of different types of marginalized groups within the field. As she stepped into the metaverse and really started to bring to life some really fantastic things there, she's also doing some really fantastic mentoring as well. So I got chatting to her about her experience of stepping into the metaverse and what it's like for women in the field, but also some of the challenges with diversity there as well. So hopefully you've got a little bit of time to kick back, relax, and have a little bit of a listen. Hi, Rachel. Nice to see you.
Hi, lovely to see you too.
I'm really excited to have a chat with you today because I know you're working on some really cool new projects. We've obviously spent a bit of time together over the last couple of years after working in the same co-working space, and I got to know you. We've kind of been cheerleaders for each other's businesses and what we're doing. But I'm really interested to hear how you're getting on and all of the stuff that you're working on at the moment. So do you just want to give our listeners just a little bit of an idea of what you're up to? And I know you're working in the Metaverse at the moment as well. So do you want to just give us a bit of an idea about what you do?
So before we get into everything, I thought it might be quite helpful if I explain what I mean by the terms Web3 and the Metaverse, as I'm sure I'll be talking about these quite a bit. So ultimately, there are lots of definitions out there for both of these terms, but this is basically just how I like to describe them. So first, let's talk about Web3. So initially we had Web 1, which was just like the read-only internet, and this was basically created by companies rather than individuals. Then we have Web 2, and this is basically read and write. So it's more sort of like participatory and social, which basically enabled like a user-to-user interaction, more like content creation and things like blogging. And we now have Web 3, which is classed as read, write, and own. So it basically facilitates sort of like decentralization, and ownership is one of the biggest features. So this basically means that people have full ownership of their content, data, and assets. And then this is all enabled because of blockchain technology. And then another thing about Web3 is that it also features, large volumes of sort of smart tech like machine learning and artificial intelligence. So we're currently in Web 2. And we're moving into Web3, and some projects already in Web3, like mine, for example. And now let's talk a little bit about the metaverse, because obviously that all links into this. So this can be described as basically like virtual immersive worlds. And in these worlds, people have avatars that represent themselves. These avatars then interact with each other, and they do things like play games. They could work in the metaverse, build things, watch performances, and do so much more. Like the opportunities are going to be endless soon. And then often these worlds are accessed through things like virtual reality and augmented reality. And they basically enhance the interactions, make them feel more natural and much more immersive. So hopefully like these descriptions make sense. And then just to explain quickly a little bit about my new company, which is called Effekt. So we are a digital fashion brand, and what we're doing is we're co-creating all of our collections with our community. We're then selling our collections as limited edition NFTs that can be worn on avatars in the metaverse. So you can also wear our digital fashion in real life, not physically, but through augmented reality lenses through your phone. So in the same way that you would use Snapchat, you can view our clothing that way. So that's a little bit about Web3, the metaverse, and Effekt.
That's so cool. It's really nice to know that you're doing this. And before we started recording, you were telling me a little bit about your experience with other people in the space and how it's been. So tell us a little bit about what's your experience been as, I guess, quite a newbie. Yes, you've ran your own business for a long time, a very successful business, but relatively new in this space. How has been your experience here?
So it's actually been amazing. And me and my sister were both saying, like, we've not really come across an industry like it, because everyone is so willing to help. And as I was saying on, before we started the call, there's like a little acronym called that people say, which is WAGME, which is we're all going to make it. And everyone is so supportive of each other. So I've actually got like people who have come on board to like help me with marketing and building like our roadmap and our community strategy, all for like hardly any money, because they know that like we don't have any money or funding at the moment, but they're just so willing to help with their skills. And yeah, my sister, who's a fashion designer, so we're both from the creative industries, and we're like, there's like no one's doing any backstabbing. Everyone is like lifting each other up and supporting each other. So it is such an amazing space to be in. So if anyone, and the other thing as well, like if you want help with anything, there's loads of amazing spaces out there specifically for women, so if you want to understand more about crypto, you can just literally type in women crypto and loads of different projects will come up. So that's amazing. I think people are really carving out a space for women and other people that, aren't just like men in the space.
The typical what we expect when we think of these places. Do you know what? There's something in there, isn't there, around people not backstabbing, people supporting each other. And it's such an interesting concept because obviously if you go on somewhere like LinkedIn or somewhere like that, there's, I would say, as far as sometimes a bit of toxic positivity with regards to how we're all supposed to be billionaires in our businesses and this, that, and the other. But then when you actually go and speak to those people and you say, hey, I really liked this thing that you put out, would you like to chat about it a bit more? I've definitely found people a bit like, well, no, I'm not gonna help you. I'm not gonna, support you because I'm trying to do my business and you're gonna take away from my business if I help you. And I've had direct conversations like that where I asked somebody for a bit of advice and they were a bit of a mentor for me, if I'm completely honest, I guess unofficially. And I was just kind of watching their career and I just loved the way they'd set their business up and what have you. And they were like, well, actually, I can't really give you any advice because you're my competition. And I was just like, what? No, there's so much work here. And also, we're not going after the same level of clients. I'm very much about the startup and the scale up and the small to medium businesses. And this person's much in that kind of much larger organizational space. But I guess when you told me that there's that real camaraderie, I guess, in that space, it's so alien. It's something that I would love to have seen definitely more of in this space.
And it's really interesting that you are saying that, because when I first came up with the idea for Effekt, I forgot to even say the name of it. I was like, oh, I can't tell anyone about it because they'll steal my idea. And then I joined this women in business community organization called the Stack World. Mm-hmm. And it's run by this amazing woman called Sharmadean Reed. And she said in one of like the first chat, events I was in, she was like, talk to everyone, tell everyone your idea. And she was like, if someone's going to steal your idea is not good enough. And she was like, ultimately, no one can steal like you and who you are. So she was like, don't be afraid that someone's going to steal your idea. So I actually from then on went out like leading my conversations with, so I'm starting a new Metaverse fashion brand and we're co-created with our audience and we're interoperable and blah, blah, blah. And, that's what I was doing. I was just telling everyone what I was doing and being open and that way inclined has meant that people have been the same with me. And I think they've been super helpful. I mean, I have reached out to a few people, a couple of women in the space who I've been like, oh, I'd love to have a chat with them about their experiences raising funds and, within the Web3 space as a woman. And they haven't got back to me. And at first I was a bit like, oh, they obviously, don't like me or don't think I'm any good. And then I was like, actually, they're probably so busy and they always get DMs. So I was like, our paths will cross further down the line. It'll be fine. Yeah. But, so you do, some people won't get back to you, but most people in the space are very, very supportive. Definitely.
God, that's so nice to hear. Yeah, I've definitely had some experiences where that hasn't been the case. Don't get me wrong, like yourself, because we met I met you when I was very early on in my business start, I guess.
Yeah.
And we supported each other, and all the other people in our co-working space were really supportive of each other. So there definitely is that, but it feels a bit disjointed. And I feel it more now that the business is successful and it's more established than I did at the start.
Right.
And I was telling you just before we came on the call, I think it's helpful for the listeners. I've had kind of like dual pitch calls with other organizations because we do similar things, and we said, you know what, let's bring our expertise together and pitch for this big piece of work, because
Yeah.
actually it could be really fantastic. And when I've done that, sometimes I've found, and it happens to be women, and I don't know whether this is a kind of a man and a woman split. I'm sure that men do this as well, and lots of women don't. But I've definitely found like I've been stepped on to make somebody else look better. So
Yeah.
they've actually undermined something I've said. And I'm thinking, we're on the same team. What are you doing? Like we're pitching for the same work. And we actually lost out on that big piece of work. I don't know
Right.
whether that was the reason, but ultimately we lost out, which didn't make any sense because we had a fantastic pitch
Yeah.
and it went really, really well. But yeah, I find it fascinating when we could support each other. So I love that you're seeing that in this space. And I mean, it's not really a new space, but it's definitely new to the masses.
Yeah. I think typically as well, women have kind of fought for, moving up the ranks and fought against each other for roles and stuff. And it's been quite a thing, that it would be like, oh, well, because there's such a small amount of space for women in the working world, that everyone would be trying to go for that same space. But I think nowadays I am finding that women do tend to kind of help each other out a bit more. And there is less sort of that, like, not necessarily backstabbing, but, trying to, jump in front of people and put yourself first. People do tend to be thinking twice about that. But I think it's something that has to be learned. I mean, within the design industry, I think it was quite rife. I mean, there's a woman called Jessica Walsh from a design agency. She's quite famous. Other designers will know her. And she actually read a comment one day that said, oh, the only reason why she became partner in Sagmeister and Walsh is because she took her clothes off and slept with him or something. And she was just like, this is so not true. Why does this woman feel like this about me? So she started this organization called Ladies, Wine and Design, which is an amazing initiative. And basically, it's got lots of different cohorts all over the world now. And there's one in London, which is amazing. They're all over the place. And basically women meet up and they drink wine and they talk about design. But it's gone further than that. So people actually manage the different branches of it. And it's just like, it's completely not for profit as well. But it's amazing because it's like she took that, which was a really negative thing. It was like, let's change this. And it's just expanded. Like, women in the design industry do want to support each other. We've got enough going on without having other women kind of saying that to us. So
it's very true. And obviously you'll remember, because you were on the panel. We did a panel back in March for International Women's Day, specifically for the month. And we were talking about being allies to women and non-binary people in the workplace. But actually there was some tips in that panel about women, because it is a learned behavior a lot of the time, because like you say, a lot of women have had to fight, especially those women that are kind of nearing the end of their careers now. They're nearing that retirement age. They had so much crap to put up with, and they had to really fight and hear those sorts of comments quite often, no doubt. That you're that was it Jessica, you said? Yeah that person experienced. So they've paved the way. So it's about, okay, so we don't all have to have as hard a time as each other. Let's try and make it a better place for the next generation coming through. So I do think that we all have a part to play in that. As women, we do need to make sure we are supporting each other. And I've certainly seen some really amazing examples of that. But I'm really keen and really, really happy to hear that you're experiencing that in this other space that you're working in now.
Yeah. I think as well in the design industry, I think it has grown to become a really supportive environment for women. And like, one thing that I always say, like, I mentor other women and I'm always like, you need to join Ladies, Wine and Design. It's a Facebook group. It's got a website. They do in real life meetups. And it's just an amazing supportive space. But I think no matter where you are, like if you're a woman running your own business, there's always places out there where you can find your tribe and your crew. And like, that's what I've also really found through the Stack world as well. I've met some amazing women through that. So I really think, like, as a woman, And if you want to help other women, like find your own tribe, support them, and make sure that you're championing other women around you as well. I think that's so important. And also, like, a real big thing, like in society, is people's biases, right? And even women have biases. So I think I often will say things and be like, oh, I need to check myself about that. Like, do I really think that? Is that just society telling me I should think that, about other women? So I think checking your biases is such an important thing to do as well. But yeah, I think, women are great and we need to support each other.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And that bias aspect is so prevalent. So yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's really important for us women to kind of back each other and just to really support, as you would with anyone, anyone that's doing something good in the world, that's trying to make a difference, that's trying to kind of stand up on their own feet kind of thing. I think it's really important.
Exactly.
You mentioned mentoring a second ago. So that actually leads me on to a question I wanted to ask you anyway. So you mentioned mentoring there. How is your mentoring going with your young designers?
So my mentoring is going really well. Obviously, I've got quite a lot of things on at the moment. So what I tend to do is I mentor for 6 months, then I take 6 months off, and then I go back into it. And I'm just finishing up with a great woman at the moment who's an illustrator, and she's actually designed and illustrated an amazing book. So yeah, I love mentoring, and I've been doing it for years now. I feel like it's so important to kind of give something back. I also feel like I've had lots of experience within my career so far, and obviously come across some barriers as well, which I think a lot of women will face. So I'm able to sort of say, oh, that happened to me, maybe you should try this. And one of my proudest moments was I was working with this woman and she really wanted to get a job. And this is a typical thing that I do with them. We put together a list of like 50 agencies you want to work with, and then we make it the top 10. And she actually got interviews at the top 2 jobs in her whole list, and then she got one of them, and I was just like, yeah, this is brilliant. So obviously it makes me feel really good, but also it really helps people. And I would advise anyone, like, if they have anything to give, like, just to mentor. And you can commit like as much or as little time as you want. As I said, like, I do 6 months on, 6 months off, and I'm currently mentoring with She Says, which is a really great supportive program as well. But also, if you don't have a mentor, I think that is a really good way of like helping you develop more, like, personally and within your career, because you can have someone as a sounding board. You can also, if you've got any issues at any point and you maybe don't want to go and speak to someone at your work, you can speak to your mentor. And the way that I work as well is, even though I finish mentoring after 6 months, I always say I'm here, if you need me for anything. People do tend to still contact me and be like, can we have another chat? I've got some issues. So, you build really nice relationships as well. But I think mentoring is great. If you're not doing it, you should do it. If you haven't got a mentor, go and get one, basically.
That's some pretty nice, strong messages coming through there. And I think the idea of doing it solidly for 6 months and then taking 6 months off, not only is that good for you and managing your business, but also those 6 months that you've taken off, you can then take that new learning to the next person. And things change so quickly in the business world that I think it's really important to be able to do that.
Definitely. I think also you need a bit of a break and a bit of space from it to be able to come back to it fresh and give it your all as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I want to come back to the idea of bias. So you mentioned bias a little bit earlier. Now, obviously, the work I do very much focuses on bias and all of those different spaces. So I'm keen to hear about, have you seen any bias in the metaverse, maybe more covert or even overt, who knows? And how does that kind of align or contribute to the way you think about bias in the design world, if any?
The metaverse, well, let's start with design. The design industry is notoriously non-diverse, and, it's pretty much all the same people in it. It was getting a bit better, but the pandemic has just sent us 10 steps back. But because of that, there are obviously issues for women when they're trying to, well, not just women, any sort of underrepresented person who's trying to get into the industry, because A, like, where's my role models? If they're not up there, you can't see them, you can't be it. And then B, the people in power who are employing, well, people have bias, whether that's conscious or not, tend to employ people that remind them of themselves. So we have this constant thing that's happening where the same people are getting employed over the people who have got, talent that don't just look like that singular person, have that same experience. And that is coming across, and that is the same in sort of Web3 space as well. So what you're finding is there are far more men, with crypto, and far more men in the space. And obviously this has affected me and women when you're trying to fundraise as a business, because once again, it's like women tend to not get any money for their businesses, even though they're 10 times more likely to succeed. And then one of the other things as well, which we can talk about within design, because it's design across spaces, if you've got the same people who've got the same sort of cultural experiences designing for everyone, but they have bias because they are themselves and they're only designing, they're meant to be designed for everyone, but because it's just them and they all look the same, the outcome is going to be, from that certain cultural background. Therefore, not everything works for everyone. Now, we've already seen this in the world through design, right? The design of the world is not designed very well for women and other people, but it kind of works really well for men a lot of the time. And the same thing is happening in Web3 space. And I hosted a round table recently at a conference where we had some women and we were talking about how we'd interacted with any metaverse spaces or virtual reality, that sort of stuff. And there was a woman there and she was saying how she was using a VR headset, and she was a Black woman, and she said that her partner went in and used it and was like, it's a really great experience. And she went in and it wouldn't work. And they were saying, it's because of her skin color that it didn't work. And it was shocking. It's like, this is a new world where we have the opportunity to fix these things that are broken in real life. But these are such basic things. And it's kind of like, but it's because it's all the same people getting the funding, all the same people building the stuff, that, there is real lack of representation there. So yeah, it's a big problem at the moment, but it's one thing that I'm really focused on and really hyper aware of. So when we do build our business, because we will get funding, we are going to make sure that we're really hiring a diverse team that represents, throughout everything we do. And I think that's an important thing that needs to happen in design, in the metaverse, in Web3 spaces, all over. It just makes sense.
Yeah, it just makes sense. That's probably the easiest way to say it. I'm just trying to think. I did a webinar recently for for people going to their senior leaders and trying to get them to understand the business case around diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, justice, etc. And I threw out loads of stats because people love credible data especially when they're talking to their senior leaders in an organization, because chances are you're asking to release funds and budget and resource and things like that. So they need to see the numbers. I think it was about 152%. So if you design a product or a service and you've got somebody from the same ethnicity in that project team, you're 152% more likely to be able to create the more innovative yada yada yada. So there's lots of really great statistics around that, but that's just one that came to mind. And that idea of inclusive design, you can't have inclusive design if you're not having representation in the group that design it. It's as simple as that. It's impossible to know. And I think that VR headset example is spot on.
Yeah. Apparently as well, something interesting that I read is that with these VR headsets, apparently women are more likely to get that seasickness, motion sickness from it, because it's actually been designed to fit a man's head rather than a woman's head. It's like all these things. It's like, how does this even happen in this day and age?
Yeah, like you said, this is such an opportunity now to design for inclusion. Like, why is this?
Yeah,
it's happening because of what you just said, because of the lack of representation in those spaces.
Yeah,
it's the same people saying the same things, doing the same things, designing it for themselves.
Yeah,
it's really interesting you say that, actually, because I get really seasick using, or real motion sick using VR headsets. Even being in VR rooms and stuff like that, I've definitely felt really, really sick and had to leave. But there's also something, so you'll know Invisible Women, the book, which looks at design and especially specifically around women and how things are designed for men. And it's funny, I was just talking to somebody recently about the design of the seat belts and the design of the airbags in cars, and how women are much more likely to have a fatal accident than men in car crashes. And it's just like you say, why have we not progressed? How are we not further now, knowing all of this? That book's been out for a very long time as well. None of this is a surprise.
It's kind of a joke, really. I feel like even the term inclusive design shouldn't really exist. Surely it should just be design, and it should just be inclusive. Like, So it's kind of shocking. But I think, once again, I feel like a lot of this is subconscious bias, because no one goes out to be like, oh, I don't want to design for those sorts of people, I'm just going to make it work for me. I don't think that's the case. I think a lot of it is subconscious, but once again, it's like people just need to be aware of that and check their biases and just think, have I got everyone in the room here that I need? And if this is aimed at all these people, am I representing all these people in what I'm building? I think it's so important.
Yeah, it's really important. I think it's also you've got the systematic challenges, right? So you've got the educational challenges and all of the societal challenges that are coming into the employment space and the kind of working space and the design space and stuff. And I've just been thinking about the idea around psychological research. So I've done various studies in psychology, and one of the biggest scare factors for me when I started learning about it was the idea, I think it's like 98% of psychological research over all the years has come very Eurocentric or very US-centric. So I think like 2% of that is outside of that space. So already you're taking away 2/3 of the world by not including that psychological research. So it's certainly not just in design, it's in every single space that you can possibly imagine. So representation, we know, is really powerful. Of course, representation only works if those spaces are open to different ways of thinking and working and kind of communicating and collaborating. And that's another challenge in itself in general. Okay, lovely. Thanks for that. I think I want to just move on to your experiences now. As a woman, as somebody who is a mentor for other women, as somebody that's been in the design space for a really long time, what's the biggest learning that you have had where you're not moving from design to meta because it's in the same space, metaverse, sorry, but is there anything that has been a bit of a shock to you between the two spaces, or is it all just kind of flowed through?
I don't think anything's been really a shock. I would actually say the thing that has been the most difficult has been looking at how to fundraise in this space, because obviously my design studio, I didn't raise money for that, but we're building technology here, so I need to raise money for it. And I started out, and I actually went to this office hours event where I got to chat to like 4 different investors, like in a sequence, and it was like you get 15 minutes with each, which is not very long at all. And I actually got some information sent through to me beforehand, which said, women typically don't get funded. These are some things you can do to help you, and And I think like it was great that they did that, but I was a bit like, why am I getting sent this? Like, why is it not the people who do the funding getting sent? Women typically don't get as much funding. Maybe you should be doing this, this, and this. I feel like it's maybe needs to work both ways, and that's something that I've found difficult. I mean, I did a bit of fundraising and then we kind of changed our idea a bit. So I'm going to be going back to it again soon. But yeah, that was the hardest thing that I've kind of come across. And then just hearing a lot about women don't get funded. They get like 2% or something. And yeah, just hearing figures like that and just thinking when you're going into these meetings, like, how am I ever going to be taken seriously? Like when all these figures are saying like, you're not going to be, like, what do I need to do? How am I going to put myself out there? I think as well, this kind of goes back to when I, out running a design studio as well. Like I would go into pitches, me and my business partner, Kelly, 2 young women. And, we'd be like, oh, we got invited to this pitch, this is amazing. And then we wouldn't get the job. And then we'd be like, oh, like, but we got invited and like, surely we answered all the questions. And then we would often see who we were pitching against. And they'd be sort of like, you know, older men. And we'd be like, oh, you know, we just weren't good enough. And I look back now and I reckon there's definitely some sort of unconscious bias there. Like, oh, here's like some older men, here's some young women. Like, who do you trust? Who's going to deliver the work properly, you know? Or we could have just been really rubbish. And maybe that's why we didn't get it.
Maybe it was a mixture of the two, right?
Yeah.
I think that's definitely a good way to look at it. I think, the bias thing is huge. And I mean, listen, I don't have any direct sessions where I train people on unconscious bias. What I do is I weave it through and we talk about it, and we talk about how it can impact and also how difficult it is to change. But that idea of just becoming more aware of it allows you to be more intentional to challenge it.
Exactly.
And I think that's maybe, rather than you having that thing sent to you before the funding kind of rounds, maybe it should have been sent to them. And here's some ways to challenge that bias when you're listening to this woman pitch to you and things like that.
That's such a good idea.
Maybe I should do that. Maybe I should offer that as one of my services. It's just also making me think, because actually if you take the intersectionality aspect as well, so if you then think as a Black female business owner or somebody that has a disability and you're a business owner and you're a woman and things like that, you really, like, every extra word that's put in front of who you are just knocks that funding down and down and down. But actually the statistics and the data show that you're more likely to be more successful. So it's a frustrating conversation to still be having, the same way as that whole inclusive design thing is a frustrating conversation to be having. And the fact that we even need to mention that there needs to be better representation in those decision-making spaces and stuff like that, it's a bit boring. Like, I'm kind of sick of having the same conversation.
Yeah, but we've got to keep having it because things aren't changing enough and they're not changing fast enough. You know, it's like the figures for women for investment in women, and especially women who aren't just white women as well. Like, it's just dropping. It's still dropping. The pandemic has obviously had a massive impact on that. But yeah, something needs to change, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. I've just been writing a piece for a client on the myths of meritocracy, which comes into the idea that not everybody has access to the same opportunities, and there's obviously external societal aspects that impact the employment space and impact the business space. And I'm starting to have conversations now with different execs and different organizations in that, do you know what? I get that you're having to take on all of these external societal ridiculousness. So the education aspect and the healthcare aspect and the housing and all of that. I get that you're having to fix a lot of this, but ultimately you are a third of the problem. So let's see what we can do to fix a lot of this stuff. And it just really helps people to change their mindset a little bit, because it's not that meritocracy is wrong on the outskirts, on the concept of it. It's totally the right thing to do. But there's a real myth there, because you're assuming that everybody is starting from the same point. You're assuming that two designers, for example, pitching for the same work, one might have an extra client to the other because one of them was a caregiver to their children or whatever. They had to take some time away. So it doesn't necessarily make the designer that did the caregiving any less able or capable or have less potential to do incredible things. So it's just really starting to shift that idea in the recruitment spaces, in the funding spaces, all of those places that can prevent people from moving forward.
Yeah.
Just stop thinking about experience by itself.
Exactly.
Because experience by itself doesn't equal good outcomes.
No. Yeah. 100% agree. I read an article about a recruitment company that was actually bringing in people from all different backgrounds into the pool to get interviewed for, like, this is like big financial companies. And what they were doing, they were saying, like, okay, so this one guy, like, he got an A, but he's come from a really wealthy background. He's done really well. Like, typically he would have been chosen for interview above maybe this other guy who had come over from Syria and had to, like, look after his family and work weekends and work evenings and everything, who got a B. But because he got B, he might not get through to the interview process. So what this recruitment company is doing is saying, look at this person's background. They have got a B, even though this is what they've gone through. So, you know, get them involved in the interview process and see how they do, like give them a chance. And I just think things like that, that's amazing. Like that's really taking things a step in the right direction and making sure that, you know, opening up the opportunities for people who might not get them. But it does take these bigger organizations to kind of go, yeah, okay, we're up for doing that and allowing that to happen. And, you know, ultimately, if you have a diverse team, you're going to have a better output. So they should just be doing anyway.
Yeah, we don't need to spiel off all of the different statistics because they're there. They're there for anyone to find on Google. It's ridiculous how many statistics there are to support this. The fact that we still have to have this conversation is madness. So I really love that you just brought that example up for two reasons. One is that these organizations, not only do they have a part to play in this, and you're right, they need to be leading the way. Like these big organizations, when they do things, everyone else follows. Government change policies according to things like this as well. So it is really, really important. But also what they're doing on a more kind of individual level is they're looking at the whole human being. Yeah. And I love that. I love that they're thinking, what are the transferable skills that this person can bring that doesn't apply to their experience? And you know, I work with a women's centre in my local area. This is exactly what a project that we're working on at the moment is to bridge that idea that experience is the only thing that's necessary for somebody to be able to do a great job for you. Yeah. So I love that they're looking at the whole human. I think that's really, really important. There's some challenges, of course, that come with that because you've got to make sure that the interviews are set up in obviously a fair way, but also that you give, you know, support to everybody and give them access to that. And that was something that we used to do in an old employer of mine. So anyone that was applying for any role, we'd give them access to us as a team in the recruitment space and the learning space to say, do you want to have a mock interview before you interview? Do you want us to give you some advice? And it was given to everybody. So it was totally fair, but it just helped those people that were more introverted, or it helped those people that had neurodiversity or whatever the million other reasons are that you might not perform perfectly in an interview. Just sometimes it's just nerves for somebody that maybe hasn't interviewed in like 15 years kind of thing. Yeah. So it's just those little things that we can do, just put that human before anything else, because we know if you treat people well, if you give them kind of autonomy in their role and you give them the support that they need, but also that meaning and purpose around other parts of their life, they're going to do the best possible work they can for you.
Exactly.
It's so valuable.
I was going to say as well, like something that's interesting in the Web3 space is obviously I was saying, you know, there's far more men in the space, working in the space. There's a brilliant woman called Lauren Ingram, and she has set up this company called Women of Web3. And it's an amazing podcast, actually. So if you want to hear, she basically breaks down everything. It's like every day is a learning day. So if you want to know what NFTs mean, crypto, like all sorts of stuff, her podcast's brilliant. She interviews women on it. But she also has a page for jobs, and she's really into like trying to get women careers in Web3 because there's a lot of money to be made in Web3, and that isn't just through like investing in crypto and things like that, but actually like getting jobs in the space. But a lot of women are like, but I'm not techie. But you don't have to be techie because no one in Web3 has got experience, like 5 years of experience, because it didn't really exist then. So, you know, it's about people and women, especially like saying, having the confidence to put themselves forward for a job that maybe they don't have like the right experience for, but what they do have is transferable skills, you know? So it's like, I mean, I was even saying to my husband, like, this is not going to happen, but if Effekt doesn't take off, then I could potentially go and get a job in Web3. And he was like, well, how would you do that? You can't code. And I was like, you don't need to be able to code. Like, I could do anything. There's so much stuff you can do. You know, I'm speaking with this guy today and he's like a marketer in Web3, but it's the same as marketing in Web2. It's just like those transferable skills. You just got to think about different platforms differently and stuff. But ultimately, women can do it. You just have to have the confidence to do it. So if anyone's interested in that, follow Women in Web3.
Love that. Thank you. I'm definitely going to give that podcast a listen. I'm taking a note of that. There's something there in the confidence thing, right? And I'm just writing the proposal for this project for the Women's Centre at the moment. And I'm writing, because we're bridging employers and the women together, and I'm writing two separate kind of proposals, I guess. One for the women to know why it's so important that they take part in the program, and one for the employers, because of course with the employers it's nice and easy. It's CSR, it's ESG, it's really great development opportunity for the people that are supporting the women, etc., etc. For the women, a big part of it is not only to be able to have that experience on their CV, because unfortunately we're not at a point yet where people don't think that's as important, but a big part is the confidence. It's the and a lot of these women are not born in the UK. English is their second language. They've come from not very nice backgrounds for various different reasons, and the systems are just knocking them down. So we really need to build their confidence. But even if you take the average woman that is born in the UK and does have a white sounding name and does have educational background and experience in the UK, that confidence thing is still really important, because I think it's about 80% of a job. If we look at a job description when we're applying for a job, we need to know that we can do 80% of that job to apply for it. Whereas with men, it's a lot less. Now, I think we should take a leaf out of the men's book and go, do you know what? I don't know how to do, but I'll figure it out. I'll make sure I go to a supportive organization that's going to support me to learn and to grow and whatever. So the confidence thing, it goes hand in hand with the experience, doesn't it?
Definitely. And also imposter syndrome. I mean, through my podcast, you know, all the women that I spoke to were just like, yeah, I have a problem with this. And I remember interviewing Caterina Bianchini, and you know, that's what she said was like one of the things that she dealt with. And I was like, really? Like, I really just don't understand how you have imposter syndrome. And I got so many messages afterwards from people being like, wow, I can't believe she has an imposter syndrome. Like, she's just so much like me. And yeah, it's just amazing. Like, it's amazing that everyone feels like they have imposter syndrome and they can understand it with each other. But it's horrible how we all have it. And it's so prevalent in women. I mean, men also have it as well, you know, but it's like, yeah, that's such a key thing as well. But once again, it's like, it's a difficult one to try and overcome. I always just say, try and have as much knowledge as you can about what you're trying to do, because that really will help you. And then just wing it, you know, fake it till you make it.
It is a massive part of it, isn't it? It's funny, isn't it? Because I think I spent most of my career faking it until I made it. And then when I made it, I was like, oh, is this it? Oh, right. No, I'm quite happy to fake it, thanks. It's much better learning and growing. You don't ever want to be at the top of your game, because if you're at the top of your game, there's nothing else to learn, is there?
Yeah. I go to a Web3 co-work, and it's kind of, there's loads of guys there. And, you know, we have these conversations about stuff, and it's helping me build faster. And some of the conversations I'm like, yeah. And I'm thinking in my head, take a note of that, look it up as soon as you turn around, you know, because I'm like, what the fuck is all this stuff? I don't get it. But then I'm like, if I was having conversations with these people, like, I know 6 months ago, I would be even more clueless. So yeah, it's just about being in the place and absorbing it and just faking it.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Okay, so on that note then, I'd love to know if you were to give young people coming into this world, young women, young non-binary people coming into this space, whilst there's still such a lack of representation, what advice could you give them, do you think, that would help them to kind of kickstart?
I think like find organizations in the space, as in like more communities, because it's so community led, that are people that are like you, have like similar values, interests, look like you, have the same attitude as you. There are so many out there, like people who are sort of non-binary that are running things. And there's also like women's organizations running things as well. They're like NFT projects, but you can like join like Discord, which is where a lot of the communities are, and just interact with people. Twitter is where everyone is talking about everything like Web3. So get on Twitter, follow a few people. You know how Twitter is, it suggests people and stuff. And you'll soon see like, oh, that person's talking about stuff that I'm really interested in. And then, you know, just title like, if you want to get a job in it, you know, just obviously look at Women of Web3's jobs board. And also there's one called Boys Club as well, which is actually for women, which is an amazing community that I'm part of. And yeah, you'll find people and communities to just be part of. And as I said, like, you know, we're all going to make it. this thing that everyone's talking about, that people want to support each other. So if you have a certain skill and you don't know how that can be relevant in the space, you know, try and like contact someone on Twitter and be like, hey, I've seen you speaking about this, like, you know, would you be able to have a conversation with me about like where you think my skill sets could lie or something? And someone would definitely want to help, you know. It's like, so just be brave and go out there and chat to people.
That's so cool. Thank you. And then one last question before we finish off, which is, knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently in the last 12 months?
My fear around contacting people and asking people to like help or give me advice and stuff, like, I think I would say to myself, just do it. Like, put yourself out there, talk to more people about it, and, you know, stop saying, oh no, I don't want to do that. Stop shying away from it, basically.
Awesome. Really great things. Are there any last pieces of advice you would give somebody? When I say younger person, I don't necessarily mean younger in age. I mean younger into this space. Something, yeah, any last moments of wisdom?
I would say just put yourself out there. You know, if you, and also the other thing is, another little acronym is DYOR, like do your own research. You know, always do your own research. There is so much information out there about Web3, all the different technologies, all the different communities and platforms. You just have to Google it. But if you go into Twitter, you'll go down like a Twitter rabbit hole and you'll find so much information, so many great people. I would say if you want to get into the space, just literally just get into it, you know, just start researching stuff. And if you've got any interest in anything, like fashion is so fun. Like, this is what drew me into it. I bought my first NFT, which was a t-shirt, and then I couldn't actually wear it on my avatar. And I was like, this doesn't make sense to me. So this is where the idea came from. So yeah, I think like, think about what your passion is, and then just type Web3 on the end or Metaverse on the end. And, you know, we'll probably come up with something. You'd be like, oh, so I could go and work for that company. I could do that. And then go on Twitter and find people that work at that company and chat with them and take it that way, you know.
Amazing. Yeah. And I think compared to all the other kind of, I guess, industries or specialisms, this is the newest. So yeah, it's not going to, I don't think it's going to feel overwhelming for people. Like, of course, there's masses and masses of information out there online.
Yeah.
But like you said, I think if you can highlight where your passion is, you can probably get really into that kind of rabbit hole. I love that Dior. I love that acronym, do your own research. I'm gonna hijack that a little bit, because that is something we say to people in the diversity, equity and inclusion world.
Yeah.
Because it's about really going and do your own research before you go and talk to underrepresented groups.
Yeah, definitely.
I love that. That's such a great last kind of nugget to go on. But yeah, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time today. I've learnt loads about the metaverse. I'm definitely going to do a bit more reading about it, and I'm going to encourage other people that I know to do the same thing. So thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you for having me on the podcast. It's been really fun.
Well, there you have it. What a wonderful conversation with Rachel there. Not just really fantastic in terms of learning a little bit more about the design space and the metaverse, but of course really starting to understand how we can genuinely make a positive impact in these spaces as well. I'm really, really looking forward to what Rachel, the team and Effekt are going to do. I've started to see really fantastic things on social media that they've been putting out there, and it's incredible. So if you don't know lots about the metaverse, I suggest go and have a little bit of a read, because not only is it big news right now, it's going to be even more big news in the future. But watch this space, watch Rachel and Effekt, and see what more's to come.